Hello again, friends. I'm Key from Travel Made Personal, and today I'm going to share one of our favorite places. It was the fifth stop on our second Alabama road trip back in November of 2024. In my last video, I talked about Westgate Park. Well, I assure you that Landmark Park is nothing at all like Westgate Park and is much more our style. This was a stop that Dusty found and was interested in seeing, so we made it a top priority for this trip. Landmark Park is a serene, 135-acre park featuring a 19th century living history farm, planetarium, and nature trails. Its mission is to collect, preserve, and interpret the cultural and natural heritage of Dothan and the Wiregrass region. Adults pay only $5 to get in, and they are open most days from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., but 12 to 5 on Sundays and closed on Mondays. When Dusty and I visited, they were setting up some sort of event around the big barn. It looked like maybe a huge birthday party or fundraiser of some sort. Crowds are so not our style though, so we quickly left that festive area and headed to the quiet, historical area of the park, which is totally our vibe. The first thing we saw after paying and entering, besides the big barn, was a children's play area and a pavilion. Being the big girls that we are, the slides weren't so enticing to us, so we walked right on past those. We made a quick stop at the potty, because we do that a lot, and met a young spider guarding the door. "Don't mind us, sir. We'll just handle our business and get right on out of here. You stay." Next, we took a stroll through history for a couple hours. Now, it's rare for Dusty and I to stay very long at any place. It has to really capture our interest and get us vibing for us to slow down and take our time visiting. Landmark Park did just that. We passed by an old outhouse, but it was locked, so we couldn't really check it out much. Next, we came to the Headland Presbyterian Church. This church, and the Martin Drug Store, which we'll talk about later, are the only historical structures at Landmark Park that actually originated within an incorporated Wiregrass town. Dr. Wyatt Oates arranged for the town of Headland to formally be incorporated in 1884, even though it only had 120 full-time residents. About 10 years later, the railroad was built nearby, which almost tripled the town's population to 1,500 people between 1895 and 1915. And in May 1897, the Presbyterian congregation was officially recognized by the East Alabama Presbytery of the State of Alabama Synod. Originally having only 17 members, the church struggled, lacking adequate resources, and had to hold service in a Methodist church building about once a month until a lot on Scott Street was sold to the church in 1905 for $1 by Dr. Charles F. Sporman, resulting in a building fund being established for the church, and building began 3 years later. Headland Presbyterian Church held its first service in the new sanctuary in 1908. The congregation was never real large. At its height in the 1920s, it was only at 100 members approximately, which resulted in the Synod voting to disband the congregation in May of 1966. At the time, it only had 8-member families on the church rolls. Sadly, the building was returned to the descendants of Dr. Sporman in 1979 after sitting vacant for over a decade. But, lucky for us, The last living descendant of Dr. Sporman, one Sporman Knowles, donated the building to Landmark Park in 1981 after the park expressed interest in restoring it, having learned that the dilapidated structure was slated to be burned as part of a training exercise for the Headland Fire Department. Headland residents helped raise funds for the building's restoration, eager to preserve the church's legacy. Luckily, we were able to go into the church and see the inside. One of the frustrating parts about this park was that a few of the buildings were locked up and we couldn't go inside. We wanted to go inside, but we were able to go into the church and take our pictures. Super happy about that. We spent a few minutes inside before strolling along the history path to the next building. The next building was Brown's Crossroads School, organized by Wesley Eugene Brown, otherwise known as Jenny, around 1903 on an acre of his farmland to provide basic lessons for children who otherwise wouldn't have had structured schooling at all. His brother, John Richard Brown, donated the lumber from his 2 sawmills in the same county. Jenny deeded the school and land to the state of Alabama in 1913. The Brown's Crossroads School operated in Dale County from about 1905 until 1929, but was not well adorned as most of the other one-room schoolhouses in that period. This one was notably rustic. It was never painted and never featured any paintings or pictures. The windows were always kept uncovered and there was no chalkboard, though a large portion of the front wall was painted black. The school year in that time was 7 months of the year, and Brown's Crossroads School kept an average enrollment of 25 children each school year until it closed in 1929. The class was often divided by age and ability, as children of all ages and grades were schooled in the same room. The school closed due to the State Department of Education instituting a consolidation process which sent school children to larger schools in Ozark or Echo, where they would benefit from a more structured education which was organized into formal grades, 9-month school years, and secondary schools which provided advanced studies. After closing in 1929, the school building was used as a church until the late 1960s, and then fell into disrepair in the later decades until it was donated to Landmark Park in 1991 by Richard Douglas Brown. The building was then relocated to Landmark Park and carefully restored. The next building we checked out was the Shelley store, which was the old general store. It served as a gathering spot for the local men, a post office, polling place, and a country store, serving as one of the most important and popular establishments in the Crossroads community prior to the 1940s. Basically, it was the Wiregrass Country Store. It was built originally in Tumbleton in Henry County as a canning factory in 1911 at the intersection of 70 and 99 by William L. Shelley, otherwise known as Papa Billy. Papa Billy owned local farms totaling 2,000 acres and was a prominent member of one of the 3 Shelley families in the area at the time. He built the canning factory next to his house to can Georgia peaches, vegetables, and produce for neighboring farms, but later turned it into a store for his neighbors and tenants. He charged cash or shares of the finished product. He had an oyster bar at the back of the store. The store was managed by Papa Billy and wife Nanny's son, Dewey. Shelves and cabinets lined the walls, stashed with farm implements, canned goods, and dry goods. The back of the store featured an oyster bar where locals shucked oysters, tossing the shells out the window toward a nearby blacksmith's shop. At one point, the store installed an oak box telephone, allowing community members to quickly communicate with the outside world. Henry County cut a new dirt road through Tumbleton to connect Headland to Abbeville, which served as an original stretch of U.S. Highway 431 and then became County Road 99 after the 1960s. Papa Billy moved his store into a new building that was closer to town and faced the newly cut road, allowing Dewey to manage the store until the Great Depression. But with the Great Depression, farm mechanization caused Tumbleton's population to dwindle from 1,000 residents in the 1920s to just a few hundred people in the late 1930s. Since there weren't enough people left for the store to be profitable, Dewey was forced to close it down. The original building that Papa Billy built as a canning factory next to his house was used as a storage shed until 1978, when Papa Billy's granddaughter, Jolene Masters, opened it up as Joe's Antiques. But she had to close it too in 1983 because the business failed to thrive. The original store building was donated to Landmark Park in 1994 by the family of Mary Eunice Shelley. Mary was the last surviving daughter of Papa Billy and Ms. Nanny. It still had Joe's Antiques painted on it when it was moved to the park by Ducky Johnson House Movers. Landmark Park was able to restore the building thanks to generous donations of lumber, electrical supplies, and labor. And then on December 10th, 2006, the park unveiled the historic Chattahoochee Commission marker that stands in front of it now. Unfortunately, the building was closed up and locked when we visited, so we didn't get to go inside. All we could do was peek through the windows. The Martin Drug Store was the next building we encountered. It is a replica building filled with fixtures and contents from the original Martin Drug Store at 106 South Main Street in Enterprise, Alabama. The sole owner of the original Martin Drug Store was Richard Brantley Martin, otherwise known as R.B., who moved to Enterprise in 1898 after attending school in Newton and apprenticing at a drugstore in Ozark. He opened his business in 1906 after partnering with Bob Walden. The Martin Drug Store was a business enjoyed by a variety of consumers, from children enjoying the soda fountain during the summer and local men gathering by the pot-bellied stove during the winter. The store mixed prescriptions and sold household goods, while Dr. K.W. Harrison practiced medicine in the back rooms for nearly 60 years, and veteran Dr. James Threadgill tended animals in the front of the store. R.B. was a member of the First Baptist Church and served as city alderman from 1905 through 1906. He and his wife, Layla Stokes Martin, lost their twin sons in 1903, just hours after birth, but then went on to have another son, Leon Brantley, otherwise known as LB, in 1906, and a daughter, Mary, in 1908. Mary was a teacher after graduating from Huntington College in Montgomery and marrying Curtis Adams of Dothan. LB started working with his father at the drugstore at age 10 and went on to graduate from Alabama Polytechnic Institute, now known as Auburn University, in 1927 with a pharmacy degree. He had been a member of the Kappa Sigma fraternity, Rho Chi Pharmacy Honor Society, and Phi Kappa Phi National Honor Society. Before resigning in 1937, he was also a lieutenant in the API ROTC and an officer in the Alabama National Guard. After graduating, LB returned to work in the drugstore with his dad and purchased one-half interest in the business in 1946, but became a second sole owner in 1948 when R.B. Martin died. LB was civic-minded and honest like his dad, not only being a Mason and Shriner, but also serving as a longtime deacon, choir member, and a Sunday school teacher at the First Baptist Church. He was involved in many local activities, made small loans to assist local families, and extended large amounts of credit. LB married Frances Smith in 1957 and enjoyed hunting, playing tennis, and following sports. He earned the Doctor of Pharmacy degree in 1981 from Auburn University when he was 75 years old. But he had to close the Martin Drug Store in 1983 and went on to die in 1987 due to congestive heart failure. Mrs. Martin was unable to fulfill her longtime desire to turn the drugstore into a museum until Landmark Park recreated the business in 2001 and filled it with all of the original furnishings, signs, and products from Martin Drug Store. As we walked around exploring what we could of these buildings, the drugstore was closed and didn't open until 10 a.m. as it was a Saturday. Martin Drug Store is closed Mondays and Tuesdays, but it opens Wednesdays through Saturday from 10 a.m. until 4 p.m. and then on Sunday from 1 p.m. until 4 p.m. So since it wasn't open yet, we walked through the gazebo and headed for the nature trail, which led us to the museum. We ended up coming back to the Martin Drug Store later on in the day. The museum was small but well organized and displayed much of the local wildlife of the area. Ironically, they had a book there called The Ghost of Bellamy Bridge. I bought that book as I have been fascinated by the ghost stories surrounding Bellamy Bridge and have been there a few times now. I will post a video on that stop later on, as we did stop and visit the bridge on the way home. We bought a few trinkets that we look for on every trip, and then we headed out to see the farmstead. But before we got to the farmstead, we came upon the Watson cabin. It drew my attention immediately because it was a bit isolated from everything else, which made me curious about it. So we walked over there to check it out. It's a log cabin built in the 1860s with 3 doors, 2 boarded windows, and a single fireplace. The front and back porches combined would be about the same width of the cabin itself, but did not wrap around. It was a beautiful little cabin. The cabin was originally located about a mile from Skipperville along the Choctawhatchee River. Sidney Dease and family reportedly moved the cabin to his farm either during the Civil War or in 1880. There are varying accounts of this fact. Sidney's son Frank inherited the farm and went on to serve in the Alabama legislature after teaching from 1899 through 1918. He served in the Alabama legislature for a few years until being elected probate judge in 1934 and working for the Federal Land Bank and the Alabama Tax Commission. Fun fact, Judge Dease wrote all 2,500 Dale County servicemen 3 times a year during World War II. He claimed that all soldiers, no matter race, were gentlemen and scholars who deserved his respect. Judge Franco Dease ended up selling the farm to Robert DeBell Griggs. At the turn of the 20th century, Robert's son John raised his family of 13 children in the cabin. Guys, this cabin is tiny compared to modern-day houses. It's about the size of a standard living room. Could you imagine raising a family with 13 children in such a small place? Anyway, the farm and cabin were then sold twice between the turn of the 20th century and 1987. The first time it was sold was prior to the Great Depression to Dr. D.P. Mixon, who used it for tenant farming. It was sold again to Sam Watson for $6 an acre during the Depression. Sam's son Max bought the farm from his father's estate. He donated the cabin to Landmark Park in 1987 to prevent it from being torn down. After visiting the cabin for a few minutes, we walked the farmstead, visiting the old buildings and the farm animals. There was a huge red wattle pig sitting around being lazy. This type of pig was a big food source back in the 1890s and was therefore very common because they could weigh between 600 and 800 pounds. You can see the wattles hanging off the sides of his face. He did seem to notice us standing there talking to him, but he didn't feel obliged to get up from sitting in the corner. Not sure what he did to get put in timeout, but he did much better sitting in the corner than my son ever did, that's for sure. I'm not sure if these are the historic Cuckoo Marin chicken breed or the similar, more popular Barred Plymouth Rock breed. Cuckoo Marins are a gorgeous breed that originated from France and are identifiable by their richly chocolate-colored eggs. We didn't see any eggs while we were there, but the Cuckoo Marin breed typically lays around 200 dark brown eggs each year, and since they have such a large stature, they're considered an excellent breed to raise for meat as well. And here we have my friend that I affectionately named Dominic, an adorable donkey that came over to say hello. He seemed to think my hand was a snack, but allowed me to love his cute little face a little and seemed to enjoy having his picture taken. No lie, he genuinely seemed to pose every time I raised the camera. It was so cute. As we walked away, he followed along the fence, keeping with us as long as he could. Love you, Dom. We visited each of the animal pens we could get close to, as well as all the various buildings with the farm equipment before finally ending up at the Waddell house. Unfortunately, the Waddell house was locked up pretty tight. We couldn't go inside, but we could just barely see through the windows. So the Waddell house originally sat on 8 acres of farmland about 3 miles west of downtown Dothan. The address was 1 RD, which is the northeast corner lot at the section of Ross Clark Circle and West Main Street. It was purchased by Leska H. Waddell in 1906. Leska was raised in Brannan, Dale County, by his parents Sidney and Ida Waddell, along with his 9 younger siblings. His father was a sawmill man, according to the 1900 federal census, so Leska and 3 of his brothers assisted their father by cutting or hauling lumber. Leska married Mattie Gypsy Hall in 1909 and raised corn, cotton, peanuts, and other crops. He rented some of his acreage to tenant farmers and loaned money on credit as well. The couple raised 2 children and toughed out World War I, the Great Depression, and World War II in this house. But the city of Dothan was expanding after World War II, and there was a lot of pressure put on Leska to sell his land as a proposal to construct Ross Clark Circle was threatening his property in 1956. Leska had been adamant about not installing indoor plumbing or electricity in his home and really did not want to sell his home. But poor Leska ended up being the last farmer in the area to sell any of his land. Rumor has it that after he signed away so much of his property, he returned home to the Waddell house and passed away that very night. Gypsy passed in 1976, and now both rest peacefully in the Dothan City Cemetery side by side. Then in 1978, their children donated the house to the Dothan Landmarks Foundation, and the house was used to establish Landmark Park as a living history museum which features a working farm and allows us to reflect on life in the Wiregrass region much like it was over a century ago. If you are a history buff or are into the pioneer era of this country and enjoy seeing what life was like in the way back machine, this park is for you. It was one of our favorite stops out of all of our Alabama road trips. We've done 3 trips to Alabama so far, and this remains as one of the most memorable stops. And listen, with a $5 entry fee, the price point is on point and you have no reason not to visit. So next time you're in the southeastern region of Alabama, stop into Landmark Park for a few hours and explore what life was like back in the day. They may even have a smartphone guided tour in place by then, so you know what you're exploring. In the meantime, be sure to stay tuned for my next video about another old church and cemetery we visited in search of ancestors. Also, be sure to like and subscribe so you'll get notified as those videos get released. But for now, get out there and explore the world your way.